But here are the banksters. They launder $386 billion. I said $386 billion they launder. Let's see what they paid for a fine. But here you go. Here's a little piece.
It sounds like the sequel to the 80s drug thriller Scarface, but instead of Miami, this one is about a war raging along the U.S. border with Mexico, and it's very real. More than 23,000 dead, more than 100 tons of cocaine seized, and more than $1/3 of $1 trillion that an American bank moved from Mexican currency exchange companies used by drug cartels. It's all in the latest issue of Bloomberg Markets magazine. The bank is Wachovia, now a unit of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has admitted in court that Wachovia failed to report suspected money laundering by narcotics traffickers. That includes the cash used to buy 4 planes that shipped 22 tons of cocaine. According to prosecutors, here's how one deal worked. Drug smugglers in Mexico City wired $300,000 from a currency exchange to a Wachovia branch in Miami. Then they wired money from that branch to a Bank of America branch in Oklahoma City. The money was used to buy a DC-9, which then flew from St. Petersburg, Florida, to Caracas. The plane then transported 5.7 tons of cocaine, valued at about $100 million, to Mexico. There, the crew was arrested. Wachovia has admitted it didn't do enough to spot illicit funds while handling $378 billion from Mexican currency exchange firms over a 3-year period. Wells Fargo, Wachovia's new owner, has paid $160 million in fines and penalties. If Wells Fargo keeps its pledge to improve its anti-money laundering procedures, prosecutors have promised to drop all charges by next March.
So they took the money, they bought the planes, they loaded them with drugs, and they got arrested. So next time you go to B of A, next time you go to Wachovia, next time you go to any of these banksters, understand that they have to launder the drug money because the money needs to be cleaned. You understand why we're in Afghanistan? That's $500 billion a year in heroin. And understand that they're building private prisons over here. And Joseph Bernstein, the police chief, can tell you, yep, they're building private prisons in the United States so that they can get your sons and daughters hooked on these drugs, arrest them, and start leeching off them. This is the same government that says there's a war on drugs. Yet it wasn't long ago that even Geraldo Rivera told you that our troops in Afghanistan guard the opium, the poppy fields. Why? Because this is big. This is big business. This is big bankers. This is criminals and crooks taking over your government. But it's okay for them to lie to you, isn't it? Because you're enjoying that fluoride. Thank you, Border Health Sharon. Yummy, yum, yum, yum. Love that fluoride. It is the #1 ingredient in Prozac, isn't it? That fluoride's good for you. Keeps you thinking, doesn't it? So here we go. Once again, I know you don't want to see the bank thing, but let's watch the bank connection again. Here's, the big banks moving the money.
We've been talking about U.S. banking involvement in the Mexican drug wars, and as our story in Bloomberg Markets magazine tells it, and Sue Keenan was mentioning, there was a plane, a DC-9, that was packed with drugs and money that was busted by the authorities, and that plane had been bought with laundered funds that they were transferred through Wachovia and Bank of America. We are rejoined now by Martin Woods, formerly at Wachovia. He served as director of Wachovia's anti-money laundering unit in London, and he left the bank after he was displeased with how executives responded to his talking about what was going on. Martin, talk to us about some of the deferred prosecution agreements that have been happening in these types of cases. What exactly are they, and do they do anything to deter future activity like this?
Well, similarly to UBS, Wachovia has entered into an agreement with the authorities to implement an enhanced anti-money laundering program, and in exchange for compliance with that, the prosecutors will not instigate a prosecutorial action. The problem being that the actual bankers, and we must remember it's people, bankers, that launder money, not machines, not actually the paper itself. It's the actions of individuals that launder the money. Nobody's held accountable. And I said recently at a conference in Miami, in effect, the bankers are having a free play at the roulette table using somebody else's money. And in the event that they win, they share in the profits. But when they lose, they walk away from the action with no consequence to their own actions.
Speaking about consequences, Martin, I'm curious if you're at all concerned for your own safety as a consequence of speaking out about this.
I'm not now. I was at the time through lack of knowledge and understanding of some of the bigger issues. You know, I'm a long, long way away from Mexico. I don't anticipate holidaying in Mexico anytime soon. You know, I have no fear for my safety or for that of my family.
Martin,
primarily because of geography.
Yeah, right. Martin, might I ask, because what we're seeing here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a direct link between the banks laundering this money and the violence that we see taking effect. State Department figures say that since President Calderon's been in office since 2006, some 22,000 people have been killed.
Actually, I read the Sunday Times in London on Sunday, and they estimate that incrementally the deaths have gone up by 80% year on year since 2007 through to 2009, which is a very bad trend. It is a big picture. You have to see and go back to the origins of all our legislation about money laundering. The objective was to take the proceeds out of the crime, to take away the incentive to commit the crime. The fact that the money's being laundered, it's going back across the border, and Hillary Clinton recognised this when she spoke in March last year, and clearly stated that some of that money is being used to buy the guns that are killing police officers. It causes some of us to ask the question, just how close are the launderer's fingers to the trigger of the killer's gun?
Martin, how does this turn out? Are more whistleblowers going to have to speak up? Because, as we want to mention, this was not just something that was endemic to Wachovia. As Julie mentioned, other banks involved as well. Are people going to have the courage to speak up and point this out?
Well, I'd like to thank John Dugan, the comptroller, for a very gratifying letter that he gave to me. But as my own regulator, the Financial Services Authority in London, I'm almost at war with the people, and I actually genuinely believe they actually have no interest in human intelligence. They push it away, and their actual welfare and support program for whistleblowers is in fact a referral to a charity. As an enforcement agency, they're not equipped to deal with, they're not in the business of cultivating human intelligence. And if I just may for one moment contrast that, as a police officer, we were reliant upon human intelligence, and last year the Metropolitan Police in London ran a campaign based upon silence. Yeah. And the silence was the sound of a bomb not going off because Mrs. Smith from number 4 Dover Street called the police. Right. They cultivate human intelligence because of the impact it has, whereas regulators don't look for it.
And Martin, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Martin Woods, former anti-money laundering officer for Wachovia, thank you so much. And
so did you see how the banks had deferred their penalty? And it's funny, $386 billion. That's a third of $1 trillion. They launder for the drug folks, which happen to be your government buddies, okay? And what do they pay for a fine? $16 million, of which they can defer and don't even have to pay it as long as they come up with a plan. They told you they have to know when you move more than $10,000 in your bank account because of the war on drugs. Yet the banksters can move hundreds of billions of dollars. They can work with the drug dealers, and they don't even go to jail. Yet if your child here in Sharon does any of these controlled substances, not only will they go to jail, but you're going to have to hire lawyers and pay lots of money. So understand this is nothing new. But it's up to you, the viewer, to start waking up. Maybe stop drinking the fluoridated tap water. Stop taking the Prozac. Stop watching the wonderful Red Sox nation and the Patriots. Start caring about your family and what's going on, unless you want to be like Nazi Germany, because all the pieces are coming in, you know, the puzzle pieces are coming together again. And it's getting so bad that the dead policemen's families have to sue the government because their family members, their officers, were shot with guns sold to drug gangs. I know it seems hard to believe, but I'm going to end you with this. Here you go. Here's a little Alex Jones. So you have an idea of what's going on. Maybe he'll light a fire under your mind, you know, in the minds of men.
Larry Pratt has been Executive Director of Gun Owners of America for over 30 years. GOA is a national membership organization of over 300,000 Americans dedicated to promoting their Second Amendment freedom to keep and bear arms and to stop victim disarmament. He's a graduate of American University with a degree in political science. Pratt was elected to the state legislature of Virginia as a Republican member in '81. A session of the Virginia House of Delegates elected to the 19th District of Fairfax County That's at Lee Key County. He's also a Reagan delegate in 1980, gunowners.org. Larry, I want to get in, and this has been going on for a month, but we're going to play a little clip for people that don't know about this or believe it, from even CBS News. And there's been a lot of newspapers, and obviously you know about it, I want your take on it, that they knowingly, and it turns out all over the country, not just out of the Southwest, allowed guns to be shipped to Mexico because that was their policy, to blame the violence down there on America. We know most of it's sold by the military to the drug cartels. It's fully auto, grenade launchers, hand grenades. They caught a U.S. Navy SEALs selling weapons to them, so that they could then blame the guns on America and use that as a reason to call for more gun control, which is what the president's now done during the Fukushima disaster, coming out saying he wants new legislation. This is incredible. And I know there's been calls now for congressional investigations, for impeachment, if not of Obama, of the Attorney General. But, I mean, is this not a false flag or staged event to blame the Second Amendment? I mean, we have ATF officers admitting this.
Absolutely. There were some very honorable men on the ground in the ATF, an agency which I don't think should exist. Nevertheless, these are people that they were being ordered to do was let guns go into Mexico to approve sales that were questioned by dealers. You know, some guy comes in with a heavy Spanish accent, got in one case, a sack full of cash, and he's buying a whole gob of AK-47 semi-automatics, and they call and say, we know the guy checks out okay on your background check, but here's what's happening. Should we let this sale go ahead? And, oh, yeah, that's fine. We're monitoring it. Well, they weren't monitoring hardly any of those, and they couldn't monitor them beyond the border. I'll tell you what, the Mexicans don't like kindly having somebody else's law enforcement in their country, and they don't. And the few that are allowed in with special diplomatic permission are the ones that must have no gun on them. They must be disarmed. So even if they're advisors going around with some Mexican police or something, no gun. So it's an incredible story that the ATF hierarchs want us to believe that somehow by tracing the guns, tracking the guns into Mexico, they were going to bust the big cartel boys, the leaders. And nobody believes that. Certainly the agents on the ground don't believe it. But what else can they say? Because
well, Larry, as you know, all over the country, including Austin, the ATF comes in with illegal aliens. They have a driver's license. The private sellers, not the gun dealers, sell them a gun. Then they bust them. Then they use that to threaten the leaseholders where they're having the gun shows to shut them down. So they're doing this at the local level, but they're also doing it on the national level. And now they've come out saying, we've got to restrict your guns, and the ATF has tried to tell gun dealers, don't sell somebody more than one gun, even if they're a citizen. Without a law, they're just ordering them to do this because of what's happening in Mexico. But statistically, we've seen the statistics. Most of the guns in Mexico, as I said, are being sold by the military to the cartels.
That's exactly what's happened. They've gone missing from the armories in Mexico, and those are the ones that might have a serial number because originally they would have been sold by the United States or allowed by the United States to sell to the military, full auto M16 battle weapons, machine guns. But a lot of the other guns in Mexico don't even have serial numbers. Those came in with a dope load. To think that somehow the Mexican cartel needs to go to a U.S. gun show to get a gun is just crazy. And you're not going to find an RPG launcher there anyway. You're not going to find grenades at gun shows anyway. So a lot of the stuff that the cartels have been using simply could not have originated from a store, from a gun show inside the United States. And I think that's why this gun runner program was set up, was to try to jack up the numbers, maybe some 3,000 guns that would be traceable back to the United States.